know what's true. It's a foundation for making great improvements. But some people, do you want to know what your weaknesses are? There's a power from knowing what your weaknesses are. Of course you want to, but you have to get yourself into also that psychological state too. So they work together. Like I found the reason my company went from nothing to quite something, as you point out, the Fortune said the 5th most important private company in the country, was that. In other words, to get at truth, meaningful work and meaningful relationships, being on a mission together to achieve something great, and then the relationships, but to do that through radical truthfulness and radical transparency, so we could take people's strengths and weaknesses and work with them to achieve that much higher level of performance.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think having data to measure the subconscious reactions, actions, responses is phenomenal, because that's far more interesting. And actually that conscious version of ourselves has been so conditioned and has become so default that it can often actually hold us back from a completely collaborative team or a completely high performing team, because that's just been the way we've worked for so long. And so all of it is lost in not noticing the subconscious. So that the fact that that's being measured is brilliant. It's really useful.
It's so powerful. Otherwise, it's all buried in subliminal things that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
Not efficient, not good.
Yeah. And I love what you say about wanting to know the truth, because there has to be some courage to face our weaknesses and truly honor our strengths. I find that, we've grown up in a society of, I've talked about this before, Ray, where I went to a high school, a very competitive, good high school back in England. And school would rank us in order of number 1 to number 180 of all the students in every subject every year against our peers. And so you would get to see that. And that was useful, but what was missed there was what you're talking about, this subconscious potential, this hidden potential.
Yeah, what people don't understand is that they think how good they are is in that number.
Yes.
Okay. And what they lose is the power of mistakes and weaknesses. That's why one of the reasons why academic success is very poorly correlated with subsequent success in life. And so people become attached to what they know. I think the greatest tragedy of mankind, it's a big statement, the greatest tragedy of mankind is that people hold opinions in their heads which are wrong that they could so easily stress test. But they're so attached to those opinions that might be wrong. If there's a disagreement, somebody's must be wrong. How do you know that it's not you? And to be able to learn, if you're attached to knowing, you don't have a capacity to learn. If you're curious and you focus in on what you don't know and you're excited about not knowing and learning, then you will learn more and you'll raise your chances of coming up with a good answer. So that whole dynamic as you're dealing with it is, am I worthy? Am I good? And I don't want to look at my mistakes. I don't want to look at my weaknesses, is one of the great tragedies of our time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a really bold statement, but you backed it up well. So I'm definitely one who agrees with you. And I want to move back to some parts of my test because I still want to get your insight on it. This one is this section on interpersonal orientation. So how I engage with others, right? And my extrovertedness is 97%. And the definition is you tend to be engaging and outgoing. You thrive at the epicenter of social activities and are socially bold and adventurous. So I'll share something that's interesting about this. I agree with that highly, very much agree with that. At the same time, I love being alone more than being around lots of people So I get a lot of energy from seclusion and solitude and being in silence. And I crave that almost. And I try and construct my days in such a way that I can have more of that. So I would love to hear your understanding of extroversion and introversion and how what I just shared with you fits together in a very natural way.
What happens is you have your natural inclination is to do those things that were mentioned, and it described you very well. And then you, like me, also meditate or understand the power of the rejuvenative nature of that experience. And also, we both meditate. And so we understand that what it's like to go into the subconscious and to refresh ourselves, and how that balance then gives us the energy and the equanimity to come back and to do the other. So that's how it works. You've experienced it, you describe it, and that's basically what it's picking up in you in terms of the excitement. There will be people who will be very different from that. Meditation is something, for example, or going within is something that is beneficial to everyone. But at the same time, when you, there are many people who wouldn't want to do the things that they just described you wanting to do. In other words, you will go into a group, you get your energy with that, you will naturally be there. There are people who are introverted who would say, that's the last thing in the world that I want. So you're naturally, as described, and then also using that in the way that I use that. I'm tested, and I'm very much exactly like you, and I experience that.
I love hearing that. It's very reassuring hearing that from you. And I know that meditation's been a huge part of your practice, and we'll come back to that towards the end of the interview. I want to dive more into that. This was fun. How I engage with others. It says that I am 81% caring. So you have a strong desire to prioritize and support others' needs, are fascinated by their behaviors and tendencies, though tend to be less sensitive to and caught up in their emotions and feelings. So that was interesting to me. I was like, yeah, I consider myself to be an empathetic, caring individual. At the same time, and to compare that to, I'm also 68% on the tough scale. So you tend to be willing to debate your and others' ideas and perspectives, share criticism openly when warranted, but tend to be more diplomatic and nuanced than blunt and direct in your style. And that I fully agreed with too, that I've never believed that being rude or being angry without control, or, to just be aggressive is ever useful, but to really share things in an open way without beating around the bush is really very much needed. So I like that comparison between tough and caring.
Well, do you see how it really picked up the subtlety of it? Those sentences were written specifically for that mix of attributes and tailored that way, because it's saying that you are this way, but you're not this way. And so though that sentence was a very apt, very sophisticated or subtle, finessed kind of description of what that means for you. And there's a continuum there, you see, that somebody might be just one way or another, right? But yes, you are direct, you are strong, you want those things. And while you want those things, and you're deeply caring, okay, that caringness does not mean that you're going to shy away from talking about difficult things to talk about, because you feel that you need to. Well, you can hear that's captured you, and that's a very important difference than somebody who might be also not, caring, but cannot talk about the difficult things, because that makes it's very difficult for them to do. And there are many people who are like that. And so they in the test would have a description that would say, and you find it difficult to talk to people about such things and resolve them.
Mhm.
That's the power of the test.
What I found so unique and powerful about this test, especially this point that you've just again re-emphasized to me and highlighted to me, is that that subtle nuance plays so deeply into my self-awareness, because I believe I'm someone who likes to embrace polarities. So I believe that being spiritual and being strategic need to work together. I don't believe it's either or. I don't think you can say I'm just spiritual, I'm just strategic. For me, it has to work together. Or when I hear people say like, oh, you have to be affectionate or assertive. And I'm like, no, I'm both of those things. Like, I want to be affectionately assertive. And so to me, I've always wanted to articulate and share more that I believe in embracing polarities. And this picked up on that, which I found fascinating, because it's such a key integral part of how I see myself. And the fact that it could get right in there is really, truly powerful.
And think about that what that means for the people that you have relationships with. And when you give it to them and they say, this is a description, because you could just go check, I believe it, it's powerful here, you understand. They're understanding you. They're understanding what you're doing, where you're coming from. And you could understand when they give you theirs, you can understand that, and it all makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. For everyone who's listening and watching right now, if you're ever speaking to your partner or you're speaking to a colleague and you're wondering why they don't tell you it how it is, because that's how you respond, if you do this activity with them, you'll be able to see how they deal with difficult conversations, how they're caring and how their caring style comes across. And this one, for everyone's listening and watching, I want you to tell me if you agree or disagree. So my humor score came back, and my humor score is 63%. It says you tend to be more joyful and lighthearted than serious and intense. 63% is pretty accurate, I'd say. I like to be quite sober too. My wife has been pushing me in the more lighthearted and joyful, because that's what she is. And I'm pretty sure if we dialed this up for her, it would be like 99%. I can't wait to send it to her. But anyone who's listening or watching right now, you can tell me if you think I'm funny or not. You can tag me and Ray on Instagram as well, at jayshetty, at Ray Dalio. Tell them whether you think it should be more than 63% or less than 63%. But that was a fun one to see in there. Again, right. The next part is called motivational orientation, which, just for everyone who knows, describes how you manage and apply yourself as challenges are faced. So I'm interested in this. Composed, it said 99%, very high. You tend to remain calm, confident, and controlled under stress or pressure. I feel very grateful to have been trained in that ability, thanks to meditation, thanks to my time as a monk. And it felt very reassuring to see that on paper.
Well, yes, and it's you, and you see how this composite then adds up to you, right? So you're creative, you have the caring, but you're strong. You'll talk about those issues, and then you're in a position where under stress you'll be calm and so on. Wow, this is painting a very rich picture, because there are some people who stress is not good for. Yeah. And you wouldn't want them to be in that particular situation that you might they need help.
Absolutely. And this one really resonates. So it's really interesting. I'll share this with you. So the composed aspect is what I gained from being a monk. But the next thing I'm going to share with you is what stopped me from remaining a monk. So my autonomous is 99%. So you are independent, self-motivated, and hold yourself accountable for outcomes you experience. But that independence is what broke me out of living as a monk, because I could no longer adhere to the rules and practices and feel that that's how I wanted to share the wisdom. And so it's interesting how experiences in our life help us gain certain skills like that composure, but then also our natural inclination of autonomy, which is very high in me, I know that for a fact, pushes you out of it too.
Yeah.
And then this is great, flexible, 99%. Which I found, this one was really fascinating. So status seeking, you have a moderate preference to please and keep up appearances, be liked, admired, and respected. So I was 50% moderate, which I was actually really happy that was actually measurable. So I always say to people, I believe it's really important to, show up, be there, be present, be relevant. But at the same time, that's not your governing factor. That's not your anchor. That's not why I do what I do. But I realized the value of it. And the fact that it was able to hit it 50%, that was mind blowing to see that level of accuracy. So these sentences literally feel like they were written directly for me. And by the way, just so everyone knows, I really do believe in the horoscope effect, where if you think something's written for you, it is you. But having done a lot of these exercises and having spent a lot of time doing self-awareness, I can promise you that this is not the horoscope effect. I'm reading these statements and feeling very well understood, and deeply understood. So I just want to throw that out there, Ray, because the horoscope effect is real, but this is not that.
And the way that we test it is, we go back. We sometimes we blind test it, and we say, "Who is this person?" And they get, "Oh, that's that person," and you get the triangulation. No, it's the real deal.
Yeah,
So, and it's 40 minutes, and wow, and it's free. So
yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, no, I absolutely love the test. I highly recommend it to everyone. I think it's a great conversation starter with your partner. I think it's incredible to do with your teams. I think it's phenomenal to do in your companies. I was saying to Ray when we spoke about this last week that my hope is that my Jay Shetty certification school can adopt this and use this in our coaching school as one of the tools that we recommend to people, because we want people to gain this self-awareness. And what better way than to have a really accurate, like you said, 45 minutes, 120 questions. It did not feel like that at all. It was really, I love doing these things and I love reading the results even more. And I couldn't recommend it more to each of you for your relationships, your families, your teams, your companies, depending on what level you're at in the company. But I'll definitely be recommending this to the CEOs, the executives that I work with in my work and coaching work. And we're going to put the link for all of you to try out. So this is the beta version, I believe, that Ray is giving us access to. And so we're very grateful to Ray and the team at Principles U for doing that for us. And so I want each and every single one of you that are listening to this, if you've been fascinated by learning about my answers and seeing how me and Ray have been reflecting, I want to see yours. So head on to Instagram, share your archetype, share your insights of what you learned, and tag me and Ray on Instagram, because we want to be able to see what is it that you learned about yourself. And then I want to keep you monitoring, and I want you to come back and tell me some stories about how this has impacted your relationships and your companies. And if you record it and send it in to us, we will put it on a future episode as well. So I want to gather some qualitative responses from you as well as quantitative. So I want to throw that out there for everyone who's watching.
Well, then let me say thank you very much, because, my goal is to pass it along and make it as good as possible to people. And if you all give that kind of feedback in this beta test, it'll all make it better and better. And it's better for everyone. So, wow, that would be just great.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. So Ray, I have to ask you, before we move on to the next part of the interview, I have to ask you, so if you were hiring me for a role in one of your companies, what would be my role? Where would you put me based on what you've learned?
I'd have you as my strategic partner. In other words, okay, big picture, where are we going? How do we get there? And then I think you'd be extremely effective in dealing with people. Because, okay, you understand all of those things, that mix that you have between, on the one hand, being able to deal truthfully with those issues, and not shying away from that, but to be able to do that well and to keep their well-being as paramount importance in their development and so on, are qualities that you have. And that would be your inclination. But I'd also need to supplement you. As everybody else. And that would mean the people that would work with you to help on the implementation. I wouldn't want you to get caught up in the details. I wouldn't want you to necessarily rely on all the precision and the accuracy and all of those types of things.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's great to hear. I know I have a job lined up if I need it.
Anytime.
But no, that's awesome. It's really great to hear that. And I agree. That was going to be my second question. Who do you think I should be surrounding myself by to be more effective and productive? And you answered it just there and then, that having people around me that are highly detail oriented, implementation oriented, people who can bring that vision to life. And I couldn't agree with you more. I know I'm on the search for them in my company right now. So very much aligned with that. And I want people to know I really felt a great degree of accuracy doing this. Now, Ray, we've talked about this before. You're at a stage in your life, and you said it very wonderfully to me the other day. You said, I'm at a stage in my life where I'm trying to share what I've learned. We see you doing that with Principles now, with Principles U, with the Dot Collector, with your new book that's coming out called The Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail. And what I love about the way you do it, and you beautifully said this, you were like, when you get to, you were saying that we share it, but you said when you get to 71, you want to do it faster. And I thought, what a beautiful way to live, that you're living with such purpose and service. And you always have, but you're continuing to do that today, and we're benefiting from it. But what I love that you have the ability to do based on your experience and background is you're able to go from these micro, individual, deep, personal topics to then scale. And like you said, the helicopter kind of method of then talk about these really macro, global, national issues and challenges. And you have not just the authority and experience, but you have the insight to be able to speak about these things. And so your new book, The Changing World Order, Why Nations Succeed and Fail, which you can pre-order right now. If you're listening to this episode, the book is not out yet, but it will be out soon. So you can pre-order it on Amazon. You talk about these three really fascinating concepts where you talk about a lot, but I want to dive into these three important concepts. And the first one is something that rings really true for people right now. And we'll see the crescendo, but we talk about the financial challenges and the financial issues that society is currently facing, only amplified by the pandemic and the craziness of 2020. And I was intrigued to hear what you felt is what's going to make nations financially succeed and fail as the future unfolds. Where does our financial power, history, and legacy lie, and how a nation's going to fail or succeed at this very important metric?
Well, I'm happy you asked the question. I'll answer it. I just wanted to also clarify that I'm writing the book and I'm putting in my drafts of all the chapters. They're available on LinkedIn. So if you really want to read the book as it's being written, you go to LinkedIn and you can get it as it's happening, and it doesn't cost you anything. So that's a possibility. If you'd like to do that, you can understand it. There are three big things that are happening in our lifetimes, or right now, that didn't happen in my lifetime before, didn't happen in our lifetimes before, but happened in history. And it was interesting to me over my years that my surprises often came from things that didn't happen in my lifetime, but happened before in history. And those three things that I'm referring to, and by the way, all happened in the 1930s, were first with financial and debt. And that means when there was a lot of debt and interest rates were pushed down to 0%. And in order to stimulate the economy, the governments had to produce a lot more debt, that the central banks had to print money to buy that debt. That coming to the end of a long-term debt cycle is happening now. We're in that era. It has big implications for the value of money and who gets money and so on. And the last time that happened was the 1930s. So I'll explain those implications in a minute, but I want to get to the second of those big influences. The second of those big influences is large gaps in wealth, values, and politics. I can measure the wealth gap, the income gap, the political gap. Statistically, I show it, I know it. And we have not had such large gaps. You have to go back again to the 1930s to have those types of gaps. And we see it every day. And that has real implications. It has economic implications, such as what will tax policy be? What will spending be? What will we put as our prioritization? So it affects us every day. But it even affects how are we dealing with each other. We have gotten almost to the point of having irreconcilable differences and being in a position where there's winning at all cost. And history has shown that that is a very threatening type of situation, that it's the brink of civil war and revolution when there's not enough respect for the system or enough interaction. So it's a really risky point that we see every day. How should we be? What are our values? What does that mean for taxes? You see it red states and blue states and the differences. And that has implications, financial, economic, and so on. And the third factor is the rise of a great power to challenge the United States as a great power. And that, again, in the 30s, for example, there was the British Empire, and then Germany and Japan rose and were able to challenge, and that led to conflicts and eventually led to war. We now have, for the first time in this this world order, which began in 1945, when the end of World War I, we began a new system. It was the American system, put the dollar at the center of that system. In America, and the American world order rules were American. And that is now, there's the emergence of China. And so we're having conflicts of China. There are 5 types of major conflicts that always happen over and over again. And we're experiencing that. They call them wars. There's a trade war. There's a technology war. There's a geopolitical war. There is a capital war. And there is a military buildup, and so on. And so how a lot of things are going to happen, how technology will unfold, how capital and trade will be, which will affect us all, is influenced by that. So those 3 things happened over and over again. So I studied the last 500 years of history to see the patterns, and I learned a lot about those 3 things, and how they relate to each other tells us where we are and gives us some good ideas of the risks and opportunities of what might come.
Yeah, no, those 3 are so interesting when, like you just said, are being faced at the same time, which makes it such a unprecedented time, as we hear over and over again. What is the root of solving or finding a solution within all of those 3? Because it's almost like all roads point to like a bad space or like a negative outcome when you hear those 3 things: of financial problems, we're at each other's throats, as you've said, the opposition power rising. What is the solution in it, or what are the ways or alternative paths that we can take as a nation, as countries across the world, to create more harmony?
Well, that's the great thing about the lessons of history is it's not unprecedented. It's only unprecedented in our lifetimes.
Yes.
We can look back over theirs, and you see these things happen over and over again. And so there are lessons. For example, on the war issue, there were 16 times where there were rising powers that challenged existing powers. In 12 of those times, they had wars. In 4 of those times, they didn't have wars, that they worked it out. And so you could see societies that came close to civil war or wars internationally. The big things are 2 big things: how the people deal with each other, recognizing whether this is a common challenge, and they recognize the need to find the common solutions through working together to find those common solutions, with the recognition and the horror of knowing what these wars are like. So fear of those wars, understanding those wars, anybody who went through those wars and saw those things up close knows that they never want to have anything like that again. But unfortunately, those people have passed away. And so that notion of fear, that the necessity of working it together in a non-conflicting way is very important. And the second of those things are skills that so that you can engineer the increasing the size of the pie and dividing it well. What history has shown is that some people are focused in on increasing the size of the pie, but not dividing it well. And so that's a problem. And some people are so focused on dividing it that they don't know how to increase the size of the pie. At the end of the day, you have to raise productivity. Whatever you get to consume, whatever you get to eat, somebody's got to produce. And so productivity has got to be important, while there's also a recognition that that has to encompass most people, so that those most people can be productive and share in that productivity. If you don't have that, you'll have that out of balance and you'll have a problem. So those are the two things. Skills and the need to do it together are the two most important that history gives us as a guide. You know where you are. Every day's not a new day, right? In other words, we're not in a position where our debts were the same as 30 years ago. And we're not in a position that monetary policy could be there. And we're not in a position that, like at the end of the war, where most people, there was a big middle class and the differences between them weren't great. You have to recognize those differences and be able to skillfully and together deal with those differences.
That's such great analysis. And I'm so glad that you went and picked those lessons out from hindsight, because I think there's a beautiful statement by Mark Twain where he said, similar to what you're saying, man, he said, history never repeats itself, but it always rhymes. And you know, we're in that situation right now where you're saying it's not exactly the same, but there are a lot of the same factors that are involved. And by recognizing the differences, but still applying the knowledge of the past that we missed out on, I think I'm really hoping that you're speaking to and guiding some of our world leaders in that direction, because it's, you know, I think there's a lot of people who feel, at least from my conversations on the ground, at least feel very helpless and don't know how they can be a part of that macro change. And so
I am speaking to world leaders, and I also know how challenging it is to be in their position, because they also report to a population that can be quite emotional and quite demanding. And so the idea of doing it rationally is important, but that's policy for the whole. But individuals need to start with taking care of themselves. So don't worry if you're not changing the world, okay, and fixing the world, but worry about how you're handling that yourself, right? And that means how you save your money, how you prepare to get your financial cushion, how you invest your money, how you treat yourself, but that may be your meditation or your understanding of such times. These are all things that you could do to help you and your family and the people that you care about. That's important. You may not solve the problems of the world, but you can know how to deal with the world well.
Yeah, that's great advice, Ray. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Everyone who hasn't, like Ray said, you can get the free chapters on LinkedIn. Or if you're like me and love having real books in your house, then you can order the Changing World Order for when it's out. Ray, your team makes beautiful books. Principles is a beautiful book. It feels good. It looks great. It reads even better inside. And so if anyone does want the physical copy, you can pre-order it. But like as Ray said, he's being very kind and generous. And you can find the draft chapters as the book's being written on LinkedIn as well to download. Ray, it's been wonderful speaking to you again. And you've been so generous with your time. And I wanted to thank you again for your beautiful testimonial that you gave to my book, Think Like a Monk, which was very, very gracious of you, very kind. I was very honored to receive that. It meant a lot. And even reconnecting with you today and learning from you and getting the fortune and the joy of being able to go through my Principles You and Personal Discovery tour with you was really my pleasure. So thank you so much.
Well, we're very aligned. I have a great deal of respect for you. And I think that your listeners are very lucky to have your input on a regular basis. So, thank you for allowing me to share these things. I hope they're of use to them.
Absolutely, Ray. I think this stage of your life is going to serve people in an incredible way with all this work you're doing. And it's what I love about it so much is that it's building tools, it's building frameworks, everything you've done for so many years, but for individuals. And I think that's going to be so powerful. So thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. And a big thank you to your incredible team for always encouraging our collaborations. So thank you to them all. Everyone who's listening and watching, make sure you go follow Ray on Instagram and across social media. Please go ahead and click on the link. Do the beta version of Principles You. I promise you won't regret it. And of course, you can pre-order the book, The New World Order, and look out for Dot Collector on Zoom as well. Ray, thank you so much for being here. And we're so grateful to have you as a regular, probably the third guest only to have ever done 2 episodes on Purpose so far. One of those 3 is my wife. So this has been